everyone, welcome to a new video. Welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today we are going to be talking about eyeshadow palette alternatives. That's right, these aren't quite dupes, but all of the sort of groupings I have for you today are palettes that I feel give off a very similar vibe. So that if you already own one thing, you don't necessarily need the other, and to also show you that, you know, color stories that look really interesting and that get very hyped up here on YouTube aren't necessarily things you need to buy into, because you may already have similar things, or maybe in the future other things might come out that are very similar that may be very interesting for you as well. So that's sort of what where we're coming from with this video today. So let's get started. Welcome if you're new here, welcome if you're a returning visitor. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I love chatting about eyeshadow palettes. I think I do an eyeshadow palette related video like once a week. So in case you also love eyeshadow palettes, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. I would love for you to join my little snow angel club, because as you can see, I'm quite fair skinned and that definitely skews my makeup preferences. And I love trying out new products from time to time, mainly Sézane and CATRICE. I just did my 2 new videos for their spring summer update, so those are up. So I'll make sure to link those in the description box down below in case you would like to see something differently from me. And I'm a channel who likes to get the use out of this product. So at the moment, I've got a selection of eyeshadow palettes here where there's a few that I haven't really tried yet, but that I'm really excited to try, because a lot of these are actually going to come up in my next 10 palette review video, which I hope to be able to do sometime in March. I'm currently in the midst of trying some of these things. But yeah, I thought it would be fun to just have a look at color stories and sort of showing you that even if something is like touted as like the newest of the new, you don't necessarily need to go out and buy these things, because very often these things already existed, or maybe it's not all that new and exciting. So I'm sort of coming at this video from that perspective to sort of just show you that really you can very easily find things that are similarly, or if you wait for like a year or a year and a half, something similarly might be put out by a similar brand or a completely different brand. So that's why I thought we could do this video today. I did a similar video last year, so I'll make sure to put that in the description box down below for sure as well, because I'm not going to be repeating any of the comparisons I already made in that video for sure. So let's get to the palettes. So the first pairing sort of revolves around this little guy, and the big version of this palette is going to show up in today's video as well. What am I talking about? This is the Natasha Mini Retro. And the Mini Retro are these like, are they pinks? Like beigey pinky shade, little peachy leaning perhaps. A really interesting like almost duochromy, like pinky peach with a blue like cool tone flash, and then these sagey grayish tone greens. And I held off of buying this for a long time because I was like, do I really need this? But then I spotted it in real life and I was like, I have to get this. However, when they came out with the big palette, I have it lying next to me anyways, let me put these side by side for you. Everybody was quite disappointing that how do you get from this to this? Nobody seemed to understand. We are still, I think, hoping that at some point in time, Natasha Denona will come out with a large palette, like one of her $129 palettes, and make that more like this color story. But in case you were looking for this color story, but in a big version, there is a brand that has done exactly that. And this was a palette that a lot of people hated on when it came out. So this palette kind of is an underrated gem in the makeup community. As far as I know, this is still available, but just so you know, that larger version of the Mini Retro exists in this guy, the Lime Crime Venus XL2. So this is very reflective packaging, so I do apologize if this blinds you. But as you can see, you get those like soft, sagey green shades. It pulls even a little bit more minty, and you get these like mauve rose tones, and you get warm tones. Now, a lot of people at the time didn't like this because it is actually quite a cool tone palette and it's quite light. And I remember that I didn't buy this initially when it was launched because it got so many bad reviews. And again, once I spotted this in real life and I actually saw the color story for myself and was able to swatch it on my skin tone, I thought, but that's perfect for me. Like these like pinky, rosy, mauve-y things, lovely. The only thing this doesn't have is that interesting duochrome sort of like pinky peachy shade with the blue flip. It doesn't have anything like that. So I definitely would like to still see Natasha Denona do this kind of palette with some of the shades of the mini retro in. But in case you were looking for a larger version of the mini retro, then I think that this is an overlooked palette that a lot of people have forgotten about, that it even exists. But this is one of my favorite palettes for years. I love going back to this. Creates really soft, very pretty, spring-like looks. I love reaching for this palette in the springtime. And I feel that we get a very similar vibe as we do with the Natasha Denona, which is why this is my first pairing in the video. And now sadly, I was hoping I could do this video before Beauty Bay discontinued this palette, but apparently it's no longer available again, so I'm not sure this is still going to come back, but the Wilderness palette got quite a lot of hype at the end of summer 2021, and I initially held off of buying this because I just wasn't loving this color story, but then so many people raved about it and I was like, okay, this is quite affordable. I think I even got it on a deal. Like, it was pretty good. But then once I got it home, I was like, but wait a minute, I already own this color story. Let me show you. I think a lot of people have already mentioned that this has some shades from the Melt Gemini in. Let me see if I can show you these two side by side. My Melt palettes are all a little fragile, so I'm always afraid to bust them up even more. But this is what the Gemini looks like. Do you just see that those like olivey greens and some of those warm tone browns from the Gemini are pretty much this entire section of the Wilderness palette. So if you own the Melt Gemini, you really didn't need this. However, once I really got swatching, I was like, but hold up. Don't those like greens in the top look a little similarly to what we've got going on in the Smoke Sessions? I felt that they did. Like this entire row of greens, plus again some of these murky shades that are very Gemini-esque. Smoke Sessions. So if you own the Smoke Sessions, you own about a third of the Wilderness palette. But it doesn't end there, because this Wilderness palette also has some blues and some reds with some teals in. And what did Melt do a couple of years ago, which you can no longer find, of course, everybody's still hoping they'll bring it back, we got the Muerte palette with reds, blues, and some teals. So for me, once I got this home, I was like, but wait a minute. The Beauty Bay Wilderness palette is 3 Melt palettes fused into one at a fraction of the cost, because these Melt palettes, they all retail for like what, 40, 50 euros each? They're expensive. But this was like what, 15 euros? And I think I paid like 12 or maybe 10 for this. So you do get a lot of good shades in here. I haven't put this on my face yet, so I cannot really attest to the quality. I did get it over the fall time, but I'm always super behind on, you know, my eyeshadow trials. That's just the way we roll around here. But yeah, I just felt that this palette, if you were still able to get your hands on it and you were lusting after any of these Melt palettes, that this could be actually a good one for that reason. And then we're gonna continue the Beauty Bay discontinue palette train, because Beauty Bay did this. So this will be my third pairing. So the Beauty Bay Book of Magic came out at the end of 2020. And this, I think, again, a lot of people kind of missed out on. So you get some blues, some purples, some greens, and some neutrals here. And I really like this, but it is quite bright. And then Beauty Bay came out with the Age of Opulence a year later. So this was their Christmas palette, I think, for 2021. And in here, what do we get? We get purples, blues, teals, and some neutrals. So, but these are a little bit more saturated, a little richer, which is why for me, these two kind of go in tandem. Let me see if I can hold them up together so you can see what I mean. So do you just see that the Age of Opulence has very similar shades in. So again, if you had missed out on this, Beauty Bay simply like dupe themselves, you could say. I do feel that these colors are richer, slightly different undertones, but these two palettes combined are a match made in heaven. And I love a blue, green, purple color story. So for me, these were perfect, which is why I ended up buying the Age of Opulence as well. Was it a necessary purchase? No. But these two Beauty Bay palettes, the Wilderness and the Age of Opulence, are currently on my to try pile for my next 10 palette review. So I'll be showing you lots of looks with those as well, because these are larger palettes, so I like to do at least 3 looks if I have a larger palette, to really try out every single shade it has. So I can't say anything about the qualities of these yet, but Beauty Bay does some really good affordable eyeshadow palettes. I like the quality that I got in the Book of Magic for sure. And yeah, I feel that they've been A, duping themselves, and B, duping other palettes as well. So keep an eye on Beauty Bay if you're looking for like dupe palettes, I think, that aren't necessarily dupe palettes. Next up is a pairing where I think you will be able to still be able to sort of get this color story if you buy the regular version. I'm not sure if this palette is out everywhere. But the Essence Mulan Disney Princess collection palette that came out in the fall, I'm not sure this was released everywhere yet, and it was limited edition, so it's going to be very difficult to find. But I felt it was very similar to the CATRICE Natural Spirit palette from their Pro Slim line. So this is the one that I bought first. And this has like warm tones with some khakis. It's a very pretty neutral color story with a pop of something interesting. And then the Mulan palette looks like this, which has those khakis, some similar oranges. The only addition that the Mulan has is that spicy yellow shade, but I feel that in terms of like the looks you'll get overall, it's going to be very, very similar. And I felt that the quality of these was also quite similar. This is really outstanding quality from CATRICE. This is one of their good ones. They did a couple in this line that I wasn't very appreciative of, but the Natural Spirit is a really nice palette. So if you missed out on this and you would really want to have those colors, then definitely check out the CATRICE line. Essence and CATRICE are owned by the same mother company, so there tends to be some overlap between the lines sometimes, where CATRICE will do a product one moment and then like a year later Essence will come out with something similarly. Or, and the case with this was released in August and this was released in November, so that was only months apart. Now it's the end of February, and that's why I've got spring on the brain, even though it's very dark and gloomy and rainy today over here. But that's why I would like to mention one of my favorite spring palettes, and it's this discontinued palette from Nabla. This is the Soul Blooming, and this, I don't understand why they discontinued it. It has warm tones over here, some cooler neutral tones over here. You get some interesting duochromes, and this is like my ultimate spring palette. Like if I were to do another like perfect palettes for springtime, I think I already mentioned this in my previous one, but I would be very tempted to feature this again, even though I never want to like double it up. These shades are absolutely perfect. However, what I have found through swatching and sort of I can't really find dupes for this in my collection, but a palette that I feel gives me a similar vibe is the Lime Crime Venus 3. So this is one of their smaller Venus palettes, and this has warm tones with some cool tones in. It's a little bit more purple heavy rather than the periwinkles we get in here, but those corals and browns, those are quite similar. So I feel that these palettes give off a similar vibe. So if you were looking for the Nabla Soul Blooming and you can't get your hands on it anymore because it was discontinued I think about a year ago or so, and you can still find the Lime Crime Venus 3, which I think on their official website they still sell this, then I think you can get a very similar vibe if you go with the Lime Crime. Before we move into more neutrals, I thought we could talk about some fun pops of color, blues. And I don't know what it is about blue palettes, but I do kind of feel, now that I've tried a couple, that once you have one good one, you really don't need that many. So the one that I'm talking about today is the Huda Beauty Sapphire Obsessions. This has always been one of my least favorite Huda Beauty palettes because I felt the quality wasn't great, but I've always kept it around because of that stunning teal shimmer in the middle. Now, what happened is that BH Cosmetics did this, the Sweet Shop Bubblegum. And I initially didn't buy this, but after trying the Pistachio palette from the same line and really liking the quality of it, I was like, okay, I'll get myself the Bubblegum. And then I got this home and I realized it has that teal. let me show you. Like, do you just see that the teal from the Huda Beauty is in the bubblegum from BH? You just don't get any weird, like, silvery shades that add nothing, and a yellow that's absolutely useless. So I feel that this is much more perfect in terms of a blue color story than the Huda Beauty, also because it has 4 mattes, 4 shimmers. You just get a lot more versatility. In here, I feel there's quite a few shades that pull quite green, whereas this one is full on blue. So I do really like that. So that's why this is definitely on the chopping block, coming with my forthcoming eyeshadow palette declutter. I'm going to be decluttering my entire makeup collection in March for you. So that's why I'm pretty sure this is going to go away from my makeup collection, because I now own this. However, in the past year, I also tried this guy. And I don't think these are too similar, but if this is too big, or if by now BH Cosmetics is difficult to get for you, on the European website, they still sell these. I'm not sure about the American one, but these were around for a while. But this Nabla Cutie palette, if you want blues, but you don't want it to be too overly blue, because we do get a neutral in here, but here again, you get that softer blue, you get this interesting tealy toppery shade, you get a really intense blue shimmer, a good navy in here. So this is blue looks for people who don't like blue looks. If you do want bang on color, try the BH if you can still find it. Again, I'm not sure about it, but in my collection, this has definitely replaced the Huda Beauty. And I feel with blue palettes, like a blue is a blue, you know? So how many blues do we actually need? And from that, we're going to segue into some warm tones with a pop of bluey teal. And I have mentioned this already before, but I think I actually came into another palette that does it. But when this was announced, the Naked Wild West from Urban Decay, I was like, but wait a minute. I think I already owned that color story, but it was discontinued because the Dream Street from ColourPop, I mean, I think I already mentioned this in last year's video, but I didn't own these palettes yet, so I felt it was warranted to show you this. So there's the Urban Decay. Like, the Urban Decay is perhaps a little less bright because the Dream Street does have a pop of something like a brighter coral in there, but I do feel that especially those top 4 shades of the Dream Street are about as bland as the bottom 4 shades here in the Urban Decay. And what the Urban Decay has that the ColourPop doesn't is that this has cool tones. It's got some grayish tones, and I do really like that about it as well. So for me, this has dethroned the Dream Street, but I actually came into another palette that I feel kind of fits this warm tones with a pop of teal, and it's this guy. This is an indie brand. This is Game Beauty's Victory palette, and this palette is just the more curated color story. It doesn't have any of the cool tones that the Urban Decay has. It doesn't have any of that. Let me show you the right side of this palette. But yeah, do you just see how stunning this is? So yeah, I'm not sure which is ultimately going to stay in my makeup collection. You know, I have a soft spot for Urban Decay naked palettes. I just do. So this is gonna live in my house for the rest of my life. But this is definitely like a good replacement. Like, let me hold it up against the Dream Street for you. Because I think if you missed out on Dream Street, I know ColourPop does a large palette, like one of their 30 pans, the Golden State palette, I think it's called. And that's like a bigger version of the Dream Street. But if you don't like very big palettes like I do, and you were looking for this kind of color story with the teals and the warm tones, and I think the Game Beauty Victory palette is actually a really good one. If you don't like the Urban Decay Naked formula and you do like something that's a bit more intense, I think this is lovely. And then we're moving into warm tones. Now, I'm not a huge lover of warm tones, so I've always been a little bit on the fence, like what's my actual favorite. And for years, if I want my warm tones to be neutral and wearable, I would have told you the Tartelette Toasted would be my pick. So this is by Tarte, and this has for years been one of my favorite warm tone palettes because I get all the warm tones I need. I can make it look very orangey and spicy if I'd like to, but very often with my complexion, it's just not that flattering. However, in the past year, CATRICE came out with the 5 in a box warm spice look, and this has definitely replaced this because I feel you just get very similar colors. Why am I not showing you this right? So you have some very similar colors in here, And I feel that this is much more curated, a lot more wearable than this is. So if you can get your hands on the 5 in a box from CATRICE, then definitely check it out. But if you saw my warm tone palette ranking, then you know my current favorite warm tone palette is the Nabla Cutie in Analog. This thing. I'm not sure what happens to this, but it's like that similar feeling that I had when I first tried this guy. So when I first tried this, I really wanted it to be, you know, wearable, nothing too red or orange, neutral but warm toned. And I felt that this is like the updated version of this. So if I want to go super duper neutral, the CATRICE, but this is warm toned and it still works really well. Perhaps because these shades aren't overly orangey, even though it looks quite orange in the pan. I felt that when I blended these out, they just looked very flattering on. It's stellar quality. You get some interesting shades in here. So that's why this, I'm not sure I still love this all that much. However, I don't want to break up my Tarte palette family, I'm sure. I love the In Bloom. That's still my favorite one, but this one, I'm still on the fence on. Do I want to declutter it now that I have these two palettes or not? Now, if you've been watching my videos, then you'll know why I already showed you the Natasha Denona Retro palette in this video, because the Urban Decay Naked 3 has been one of my all-time favorite palettes. I hold this thing near and dear to my heart. I've always said that there are only 3 palettes on the planet that I would buy a backup of if I ever hit pan, or if they were discontinuing it, and the Naked 3 is one of those palettes. It's that loved. It doesn't look that loved because I don't have that many dents in here, but I used to be a very, very light hand makeup user, like light-handed makeup user back in the day. I really didn't load my brush up all that much because I was afraid that with how expensive this was that I was going to go through it really quickly. So there's that nostalgia tied into it as well. This is very much early makeup days for me. But you can see I've got a dent and trick also here, Mugshot, and the shade right next to it called Factory. Those have seen quite a bit of use, and I always love using Black Heart as liner. But I have been telling you how, no matter how much I love this, and for years this was one of my top 3 favorite palettes, but there have been some new releases in the past year that I feel have knocked it off its throne. That's a very old palette, but these two are very good alternatives to take its place. So that's why I wanted to mention this again. The Natasha Denona Retro, I said it in my recent 10 palette review video. For me, this is more like my everyday rosy mauve toned neutrals that I also get from the Naked 3, and then some, because you do get some texture and sparkliness in here. It does have a couple of warm tones, but I don't really mind it that much. And then the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz is the fun palette. So this has the fun sparkles and the fun like purpley shades. Let me show it to you like this. So this just has, I feel in terms of cool toned shades, both of these are equally cool toned, I'd say. Like the Natasha Denona isn't as cool toned as this. So I feel that in terms of like the spirit of the color story, the Huda Beauty is more similar. But I feel that these shades are just a little bit more on the like fun, playful side, whereas the Natasha Denona, I can get more everyday looks out of, if that makes sense. So both of these, I mean, it takes 2 of these to replace one palette, essentially, for me, because in the Urban Decay Naked 3, I really love playing around with Trick. That's why it has a dent. That was like my go-to lid shade for such a long time. But yeah, now that I have these 2, I think the Naked 3 has definitely been dethroned. And finally, I wanted to also mention a couple of other rosy tone palettes, because I love rosy tone palettes. I ranked all of them for you in January, and the Naked 3 isn't the only palette that, you know, I really loved over time. So I thought, now that we have this, the Naked 3 Mini, I thought I could do a quick comparison to show you how these like hold up next to each other. So that if you don't want to buy the big version, how does the small version line up with it? So this is what these palettes look like if you hold them side by side. And as you can see, I do think that in spirit, the Naked 3 Mini is very close to the original Naked. You do get a little bit more like taupiness towards the end here, but you get quite a lot of light shades. So I feel that this can be a really good replacement as well for the Naked 3. So again, that's why I haven't bought a backup of this yet, because I now feel I have something to replace it. Plus we have this little guy. However, if you cannot access this because Urban Decay is being discontinued in Europe, I have found just recently, or if you find Urban Decay a little bit too expensive, or if you want an all matte color story, then there are things on the market for sure that will give you a very similar vibe. Let me talk to you about something that's far more affordable that will give you a similar thing. This is the CATRICE 5 in a Box Soft Rosy Look. I mean, it has more depth, it has more definition, it has 2 shimmers, 3 mattes, it's still rosy toned, and it's a fraction of the price of the Urban Decay. So if you're on a budget, definitely check out the CATRICE 5 in a Box, because these are like, what, $4 or $5? These are good, and it's essentially the same color story. You really don't have to shell out this kind of money. However, if you do want to spend a little bit more and you love mattes, then check out this guy. This is the Dose of Colors Marvelous Mauves. I still have this in the old packaging, but again, here I feel if you love your mattes and you just want rosy mauve tones, and this is going to cover you for a lifetime. This is a really excellent formula. You will have to pull in shimmers if you want shimmers, but like I said, this is, if you love your mattes and you don't want those annoying shimmers, because the Urban Decay does have like one very lackluster satin shade in there, who asked for that? Then this can be a really lovely palette that is an alternative to the Naked 3 if that's what you're looking for. So those were all of the palette alternatives I wanted to show you in today's video. Leave me a comment down below if you have any palette alternatives for your own. I do not call these dupes, and I do that very deliberately because many of these palettes have dupe versions out there on the market. I just like going into my own collection and showing you that, you know, I have a very large collection because I end up doing YouTube videos and talking about these things and reviewing things and, you know, just feeding the monster, you could say. But I want to show you as well that you don't necessarily need all of these things. And I feel that with buying dupes, it's like a way to get the color story that you might want. And I'm someone who's like, if I can afford to, then I would rather wait a little bit and, you know, make sure I have some money left to be able to buy these more expensive palettes so I can try the real thing and really talk about what I feel. Because I've tried some dupe palettes in the past and I have to say I've never been impressed. Whenever I've tried the real deal, I've always felt very much more satisfied. So for me, it's a bit like, it's this theory of, you know, buying one pair of expensive shoes that lasts you 5 years is cheaper in the end than buying a new pair of shoes every year after they've fallen apart. So for me, it's very much that. I know I will not get the same satisfaction out of a dupe palette than when I actually buy the more expensive product. That's just how it works for me. I fully understand though that if you do not have the funds to buy palettes of the magnitude of a Natasha Denona or some of the more expensive brands I've shown today, that I also hope that it's helpful that I can include some more affordable things that aren't straight up dupes, but that are going to give you a similar color story that, you know, are much more widely available than some dupe palettes that are featured a lot in makeup videos. So that's why I also wanted to feature some more affordable things here too. So I hope this video was helpful for you, that you were able to get something out of it. Thank you very much for being here today. I greatly appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up if you'd like what you see here, and then if you would like to support the channel even more, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe. I make 3 new videos a week. I already mentioned I will be doing declutters very soon, and I love chatting about eyeshadow palettes, so there's more content coming your way for sure. So I hope you would like to stay tuned, and I hope to see you in my next one. Take care, have a great day, bye bye.